Let's talk about the resilience framework. There are various takes on resilience from different fields, such as engineering, psychology, etc. What we will look at in the context of socio-ecological systems is ecological resilience. The initial thinking started in the 1970s, but it picked up after 3 decades. Gunderson and Holling stated that understanding the loss, creation, and maintenance of resilience through the process of co-discovery is at the heart of sustainability. First of all, let's look at our context. We often describe our current reality as complex, wherein complexity is brought about by the diversity of contexts, communities, and cases. And then we add that this diversity is constantly changing. It becomes difficult to analyze complexity, much more conduct programming towards sustainability. This complexity is recognized in various fields, but recognize also that the new normal is not that we have to do physical distancing or wear masks. The new normal is that dynamic complexity is accelerating. It is difficult to forecast the future. Why? Because people are reflexive. People react to forecasts. When we see a negative trend, we look at means to avert the forecast. People communicate with others and learn. By doing so, they change the given parameters and the forecast itself. Instead, foresight, a combination of analysis of trends and insights from learnings and dialogues, not forecast, is needed. Systems are changing faster than our ability to recalibrate forecasting models. Learning is the key to adapting to a changing world. However, systems might not be so unpredictable from a larger and longer perspective. Resilience is measured in decades, not 6 month or 3 year projects. Patterns emerge with hindsight. Often we approach reality with an ordered, linear plan. We analyze the context, we define the desired change, and then we implement a strategy that is supposed to change the context. However, reality is not as linear. The context, strategy, and the goals all experience dynamic complexity. The links between cause and effects are not clear. Reality is not linear and stable. Moreover, linearity and stability are not the goals. Instead, we have different strategies and different results. We often seek functional diversity, wherein similar problems have similar solutions. This is essential for efficiency and productivity, such as streamlining. On the other hand, we also have response diversity, wherein similar problems have possibly different solutions. We have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, just in case things go wrong. Redundancy and buffers. These are essential for resilience, such as stockpiling and contingency plans. So, what is resilience? For engineering resilience, it is simply about recovery or returning to the original state. In disaster risk reduction, we conduct risk analysis and realize the high level of vulnerability of poor men, women, and communities. After a disaster, why would we even want to return to a state of high vulnerability? Is build back better actually possible? On the other hand, ecological resilience is the ability to absorb disturbance, shocks, without shifting to an alternate regime. How far can the bamboo bend before it breaks? We recognize that systems have resistance such that it can absorb stresses, and this capacity building we try to do to avert disasters with various programs, projects, and collective action. But what if the bamboo breaks? What do we do? Do we even prepare for such a worst case scenario? We conduct advocacy and campaigns to prevent the building of the Kaliwa Dam, to prevent the large scale mining operation that will pollute the downstream, or to address the eviction and demolition threats. But what do we do if our advocacy fails? Do we simply leave the community and look for another community where we can build up their power to prevent another development aggression through advocacy? Why look at resilience? Simply because socio-ecological systems undergo or have the potential to change. The Sustainable Livelihood Framework emphasizes the diversity and complexity of communities. Resilience builds on this and highlights changing complexity. Which is more resilient, the weeds and grass ecosystem on the left or the forest ecosystem with the high diversity on the right? We are often taught that forests are resilient because different pests find it difficult to attack the different trees in the forest as a system because of biodiversity. Each species has a niche that will serve a function to ensure that the system is sustainable. Now introduce fire, a disaster. Is the forest still resilient, or is the grass ecosystem more resilient? Maybe the primary question we should ask is resilience to what? We want to be resilient to disasters. We want to build resilience there. On the other hand, we do not want poverty to be resilient. We do not want a dictator to be resilient. In these cases, we want to reduce resilience. From there, we realize that our strategies should be geared towards building or reducing resilience of something. Ecological succession, or the evolution of the ecosystem from opportunist species such as weeds to a high biodiversity forest, is a slow, predictable change. At the start, growth is high and structures are simple. High resilience, but low resistance to diseases. At the other extreme, the conservation stage, this is highly complex. Development is controlled. There's actually high resistance, but low resilience. Natural resource management initiatives are about managing or aiding nature in this process. But what if the bamboo breaks? The release stage or the disaster leads to sudden losses and damages. Survival depends on reserves, savings, or other pool of resources that survived or are within reach. On the other hand, the recovery stage is a high uncertainty stage. Renewal, not recovery, is the goal, especially for highly complex systems. How do we reorient or redefine the identity of the community? Systems change rapidly. In this particular case, the NGO applied the lessons they learned in decades of organizing the urban poor in Manila to realize more accomplishments in their work in Tacloban after the super typhoon Yolanda hit the communities. All of these were done in just 3 years of work. Small input can be influential and entrenched. There are multiple modes and level of reorganization. The dynamics of recovery and rehabilitation are different and not just a simple build back better mantra. This can be graphically represented in the adaptive cycle. At what stage is the community? Here we find different communities at different stages. We can see a fisherfolk community conducting mangrove rehabilitation, maybe at the conservation stage. An Aita community at risk of The Kaliwa Dam project that's being proposed may be at the tipping point wherein they can easily go to a disaster stage. A community being struck by a strong typhoon is already at the release stage. Urban centers reopening after the economy after the pandemic may be at the start of the reorganization phase. Aita communities still relying on their indigenous practices long after their ecosystem has been covered by ash and where their culture has been exposed to the economy of the urban centers are struggling for reorganization. What is the desired outcome for each community? What strategy should be pursued? Are they at all similar? The most provoking definition of resilience I encountered is this. Resilience is the power of individuals and communities to live with dignity, responding successfully to the disasters and the risks they face, but taking full advantage of the opportunities they have. First of all, it introduced resilience as a power. There's an emphasis on empowerment. It also reaffirms dignity, worthiness, and self respect. It recognizes opportunities, thriving beyond subsistence and survival. And then it introduces risks, incorporating risk based to needs based and rights based approaches. This definition is redefining resilience as the evolution of development and humanitarian work. It uses a political definition rather than a technical one. The systems oriented resilience and sustainable livelihood framework would involve analyzing relationships of different systems at different scales and levels. At the horizontal level, it will require dialogues and linkages within and amongst local communities, different sectors, and different disciplines. Recognizing different vulnerabilities because of gender, religion, race, age, ethnicity, class brings about a wider perspective of poverty and suffering. At the vertical level, how do the higher and lower levels interact? Higher level institutions draw lessons from lower levels and pass down this memory through top to bottom institutions and policies. On the other hand, lower level platforms cause revolutions when actions are synchronized. The Bibinka approach has proven to be effective in influencing meso-level platforms. Cascading strategies upward and downward proves to be very efficient. At the time axis, resilience strategies anticipate future risks and trends from the past to define strategies for the present. Before drawing out lessons from experience using the resilience and sustainable livelihood framework, are there any questions?